Happy New Year. This is Jack Branch coming to you out of the New Orleans area. And I know you're like, why in the heck are you doing this Healthy Wealth show on New Year's Day? And I'm excited because I've met a gentleman actually last spring that we're going to bring before you today, David Guinn. And David and I have been talking about some things that I think are very prevalent and very needed for our society and all of you today. So as you come in, definitely comment, tell us where you're coming from, share this video if you get some value. And the purpose of the Healthy Wealth Show is really that we don't get any one particular thing out of proportion. There's a lot of people that I run across in my business endeavors, and including myself at times, where we put so much emphasis on the wealth component, but we don't really focus on the health. And today we're going to talk about an area or a topic that I think is very crucial to you and I living a good 2019 and way beyond that. And that's in the area of really being quiet and quiet in our minds. There's a lot of distractions and a lot of things out there. So I'm going to introduce my good friend from the Carolinas, Mr. David Guinn. How are you this morning, David?
Jack, talk to me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So, tell us a little bit about you. I know you have a family and you have some kids, and you're involved in a myriad of endeavors, from doing missionary work to life coaching and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit, more about your passions in life, about helping people kind of get unstuck.
Yeah, bro. So I get the privilege of traveling the world, helping people experience the more that they were created for. I love helping people get unstuck, and I love people helping them take the next step in life. And so sometimes that looks like traveling overseas. Sometimes that looks like speaking in the business world, or sometimes, and a lot of times like today, that looks like loving on my 3 kids, including a foreign exchange student from China and my lovely wife, Kara. We've been married for 11 years. I've got 2 8 and 9-year-old boys, and then a 4-year-old little girl we adopted from Ethiopia about 2.5 years ago.
That's incredible. And, again, David and I met up in Virginia at a conference called Heart of a Warrior. And if you don't know anything about it, Google it. There's one coming up in the spring, I think in the March time frame. And it's really a way where men can, in essence, come to a deeper understanding of their purpose and calling in life versus just kind of meandering. And I was reading something this morning, David, and I've got some notes here to kind of go through to keep us on track. But, C.S. Lewis said, doubt is a real key thing. It comes to us in a myriad of ways. When he was an atheist, he doubted. And even when he became a believer, he became, doubtful. And I don't think the issue is that we won't doubt, but how do we deal with doubt? And I think, my prayer this year, and, as well as for a lot of people out there, is not really the fact that we won't doubt, but really, God, how are we going to help me with my unbelief? And, it's really doubt is a struggle to believe. And, so as you've traveled the world, ministered to a various amount of people from all walks of life, what do you see as a common theme that exists out there in the realm of doubt, or too much information, or information overload, if you will?
Sure. Yeah, I think a common theme, no matter what culture or what socioeconomic platform that you're in, whether you're ultra rich or whether you're struggling just to get by, most people struggle with becoming victims of burnout. What I found is people are asking this question, or something along this line. Dave, how do I pour out without burning out? Or Dave, how do I give it 100% without being spent? And so in this concept of not being a victim of the burnout, what I found is that the key to being effective is stillness, not busyness. The key to effectiveness is stillness, not busyness, which is counterintuitive because if I want to get a lot done today, I need to get up really early and go to bed really late and pack as much as I can in between that time and do as much as I can and accomplish as much as I can and get as much checked off of my to-do list as possible. But that necessarily isn't the way to be most effective. And as I was talking to a running coach recently, they gave me a lot of insight into how they train new runners. And what this running coach told me is, he said, before I start people on their feet to run, I start them on their back to breathe. He said, I got to teach them how to breathe before I can teach them how to run. And I feel like that's really helpful advice for us in life. Before you start in the life coaching world, before I teach people how to be effective in life, I need to get them on their back and breathe. I need to teach them how to develop a rhythm. And in this concept, what is your rhythm? Think through that, viewers. What rhythm did you have in 2018? Most people's rhythm is go, 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 do, survive, survive, survive. I made it through another day. And what we would call that is invest. And so what I want to encourage people to do in 2019 is to develop a different rhythm, a rhythm that looks something like rest and invest. Rest and invest. And what would happen with this running coach, going back to him, is he would teach his clients how to develop a cadence of breathe, step, 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 breathe, step, 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 breathe, step, 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 breathe. And then as they became more advanced, he would go breathe, step, step, breathe, step, step, breathe, step, step, breathe. And we need that same kind of rhythm in our daily life of rest, invest, invest, invest. Rest, invest, invest, invest.
You know, it's interesting. The United States being as wealthy as a country as we are, is one of the countries that has the most people that are, the least happy, which really is kind of sad. As you say, we tend to think if we have more, we'll be more happy. And so we've adopted kind of this, belief, if you will, or mindset that if I only have X dollars, or if I have this amount in an account or this amount of stuff, it's going to lead me happier and happier. And I was talking one time to this lady from Brazil, and she said, Brazilians are some of the most happy, passionate people that exist, but you Americans have not figured that out. What have you seen in different parts of the country, of the world, not country, and when you've traveled, how folks have just administered these healthy rhythms or don't have all the distractions that we do in the continental U.S.?
Sure. Well, it's definitely easier to implement, for sure, when we're not dealing with what I would call an overstimulated culture, or a very death by distraction culture, or which leads to a very unfocused culture. And so it can be easier to implement. And I get the perspective when I go into some developing countries that don't have nearly what we have. You see a happiness on their face. You see a joy in some sense. You do see, but I feel like sometimes that happiness is because the Americans are in town. I'm not saying that they genuinely aren't that way. You certainly don't need the stuff, but the more I go over, the more I think, man, they're just fired up out of their minds at a foreigner's hanging out with them. And I'm fired up that we get to help them take the next steps in their life and get to know them and love on them. But what I would say ultimately to the question is, it's the end goal. So if you want the stuff, that's fine, but happiness can't be the goal, because stuff will make you happy for a moment or maybe an extended period of time. But the goal, if the goal is happiness, it's not going to be as satisfying as if the goal was wholeness.
That's good.
And so how is this going to make me more whole? Not how is this going to make me more happy? Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Do you still want the nice boat or the nice car or the nice clothes or whatever it is, shoes, ladies, or guys for that matter? Go for it. But it will bring happiness for a period of time, but the new car smell is going to wear off at some point. And the question is, how are the decisions I make this year going to lead to more wholeness, not just happiness?
That's good. There was that movie that came out with Will Smith a few years back about the pursuit of happiness, and it really does. It's got a lot of good messages to it underlying, but the only thing ultimately, as you and I know, that's going to give you fullness and really completeness is Christ, right? We're trying to fill it with all these substitutes, if you will. And I guess from your perspective, how did you learn how to be still, in this world that we're bombarded with all these messages? Just while you and I are on this, I'm getting bombarded with emails and phones buzzing from text. How do you really learn to be still? Because when I was away in California a couple years ago to this place, J.H. Ranch, with, a retreat with my daughter, this woman came and she's got a gift to be able to say what a scripture is. So I must be needing this more than maybe a lot of the viewers about be still and know that I'm God. I got the plaque right here in front of me, but it seems to be a mountain that even myself am circling. So I know I'm not the only one. So how did you learn to be still?
Yeah, great question. And I would like to preface that by saying often our greatest breakthroughs come right after our greatest attacks.
Amen.
And so that's someone needs to hang on to that, maybe even in this moment, but certainly for this year, because again, as we know, we are living in a world at war, as we learned from the Heart of a Warrior, and the enemy is playing strategic assaults against our heart to take us out. And so, but the good news is that our greatest wins, our greatest successes, our greatest breakthroughs is the word there, often come right after our greatest attacks. And so about 3.5 years ago, my dad was struggling with depression and had been a closet alcoholic for 20 years and was having trouble sleeping at night and mixed a bunch of different things one night. And next thing you know, he had taken his life. And that was a very tragic moment for myself and our family, and one that was completely surprising, very, very tragic. But nonetheless, I had learned how to ask the question, how and what, instead of why. Why often and usually doesn't help in moments like this. It doesn't lead to a positive solution or conclusion. And so how or what? How am I going to experience you, God, in a new way? And what are you trying to develop in me? Those are two great settling questions, perspective-changing questions, if you'll really ask them and press in and process in God's presence. And so how did I get to experience God in a new way? The major one was him as healer. And the thing about his character is we can only experience it often in the opposite situation. So he's promised to be the God of all comfort. And so that means I can only experience him when I'm uncomfortable. But I don't ever want to sign up for being uncomfortable in life. And so when I am uncomfortable, I often wish away the uncomfortable. Or oh God, this sucks so bad,
we escape that, don't we? We want
right.
to pull the valve to escape and not have that refining process go down.
Right. So, and exactly. So even this morning, I was asking a question with the Lord. Well, God, thank you for this opportunity to experience you in a new way, not focus on how difficult or uncertain this situation was that I was going through. And so, and then what do you want to develop? Again, the same thing, whether it's a fruit of the Spirit, that's a good place to start. It's always produced in the opposite situation. God's promised to produce peace in us, but peace is only produced in the chaos, not on the fishing boat, on the still waters. And so, what he produced in me through this tragedy was teaching me how to be still. And as you've mentioned, you have some form of decoration right in front of you that says, "Be still and know that I'm God." I pretty much basically had only seen that on a piece of artwork. I had never heard any teaching on how to be still, how to receive, how to get full, how to pour out without burning out. It wasn't something I had ever seen modeled for sure. It was more of a decoration than it was a reality in my life. And I would say that is the case for a very large majority of America, if not the world. We are not accustomed to be still. There's too much to do. And in the process of doing, we become a slave to the busy. And without realizing that busy is an acrostic for being under Satan's yoke.
Wow.
So what if the enemy's number one strategy isn't to make me mess up, sin, make poor choices? What if the enemy's number one strategy is to make me busy? What if the number one strategy of the enemy is to keep me so focused on the do that I become more known as a human doing than a human being?
That's
and
good.
so it was in this process of getting away for 2 weeks to heal. I didn't answer text messages or phone calls, or I didn't have to meet with people and minister and all this. I just got away for 2 weeks, one on the coast of North Carolina, one down in Tampa, Florida. And it was during this time that God started the beginning of teaching me what it looked like to be still and to receive. And he took me to two passages outside of the Psalms 46 passage. The first one was Ecclesiastes chapter 5. And here Solomon tells us to draw near to hear.
And for those that are listening to this message that don't know a little bit about Solomon, just kind of thinking about briefly describe who Solomon was, one of the most wealthy people. I mean,
True.
In the Old Testament. Give a little background on that, if you will.
Yeah, he was the wisest and wealthiest man on earth ever. And so he wrote Proverbs for us, and he also, we believe, wrote Ecclesiastes. But nonetheless, he was writing here that it's very easy to come into anybody's presence, especially God's, to draw near to talk. What you need, want, bless, fixed, restored, and God cares about those things. He says you have not because you ask not. And he says, ask and you will receive in Matthew chapter 5. But there's more to my conversation with Jesus, or my conversation with anybody, than just asking. And what I found, Jack, is that the way that I listen to the Father is typically how I listen to other people. If I come into God's presence with a lot of words, I often want to be heard a lot in other people's presence. I might look like I'm listening at times to people, but I'm just waiting for them to stop talking so I can get my opinion in. Or, oh yeah, but let me tell you this. Or, oh yeah, me too. Or, oh yeah, let me tell you about my story. And I'm not really listening with my heart and listening to their heart. And so a lot of times now I'm coming to God and saying, hey, Holy Spirit, or hey, Father, what's on your heart today? And then he also led me to this passage in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 3, in the New Living Translation. It says this: come to me, God speaking, with ears wide open. Come to me with ears wide open. Listen, and you will find life. Listen, and you will find life. And that sounds really good, but I found that I wasn't creating any space in my schedule to just pause and listen, to pause and receive. I was really good at giving and helping and encouraging and preaching sermons and doing talks and making a difference. But I was running on E for a really long time. There's so many people in life, but specifically ministry, who are running on E because they haven't quite figured out how to receive yet. There's a lot of singing, a lot of talking, a lot of praying, but not a lot of being still, coming to God with ears wide open, breathing, Yeah. And learning how to turn off the noise.
That's good,
Um,
man. I think so often, like you said, kind of in the normal evangelical movement and some of these huge, I mean, good stuff's going on, but it's all about the
right.
programs. It's all about if I get involved in this, then I'm just going to morph into this quote unquote perfect spiritual person, where really what God
Mm,
needs is empty vessels. What he needs is an
sure.
empty vessel to be filled with him. And we're trying to fill it with all this other stuff that can be good. But is it really going to get us to the place where he desires us to get? Are we going to submit? Are we going to really receive? And it's almost that adage of being on the airplane and putting the oxygen mask on yourself. Somebody asked me this question about
Yeah.
12 years ago, and he said, how can you give something to somebody that you don't have yourself? And I didn't
Yeah.
like the question, but the question is more relevant today than it ever has been.
Yeah, Jack, I like to think of the idea of I want to be known as a love diffuser. The oil diffusers have taken over many homes, including my own. And I'll never forget the first time I walked into a house that had an oil diffuser. I immediately noticed the smell, like as soon as I opened the door. And I noticed that it wasn't a candle, as much as I like the Yankees candles. I noticed it wasn't a Glade plug-in. This was a different kind of aroma that had filled this room, this home. And I immediately said, what is that? And they told, oh, this is an oil diffuser. I said, I need that in my home. And we've been using one ever since. And so what I found about oil diffusers is that there's some pretty basic steps to using them. The first step is you got to plug it in. And that sounds pretty obvious, but so often I can live disconnected from my power source. I can live distant and disconnected from the very thing or the very person, we could say, that gives me life. And so when I'm learning how to be still, it's creating space to get reconnected, to get close and connected to my power source. But not only that, once you plug it in, you also have to take off a lid. Depending on what your diffuser looks like, there's some form or type of lid that you have to take off so that you can put water and the desired amount of oil and the kind of oil that you want in it. And so what I also found is that that we've put lids over our heart. It's not that I just get connected, or not that I just pray the prayer. It's not that I just go to the church or to go to the sermon or the conference or the event or whatever it might be, or even that I spend time with Jesus in the morning. It's what's getting in the way of me being loved. When I go to Chick-fil-A and Miss Kathy comes up to me and says, hey, Dave, good to see you. What you drinking today? Oh, that's right, sweet tea. And she says, would you like a refill? And as you know, any Chick-fil-A says, if you want a refill, right, you take off the lid and I'll go get you a refill. And I feel like God's saying the same thing to us. He says, if you would just take off the lid, I could give you a refill. But the crazy thing would be if Kathy goes over to the sweet tea dispenser and she goes to push it on the tap and she starts moving that cup back and forth really fast. I would maybe question whether she got sleep that night or maybe she's been working too many doubles. But everybody knows the only way you can get a refill is if you be still.
That's good.
And so sometimes we want to go through the drive-through of God's presence, not knowing that there's only a dine-in option. And so when we create space to be still, it creates space for us to get a refill. And so going back to the love diffuser, if we can take off the lid, God can put the good stuff in. And so there's a lot of good stuff that he wants to put in. But I found that I found that the lids actually represent something. I found that the lids represent the L, the I, and the D, the lid. The lies I'm believing, the idols that are deceiving, and the do that I'm achieving are keeping me from receiving the one thing that can bring me to life. Lies, idols, and do. When I was in middle school, I was picked on. I was wounded. Wounds are the breeding ground for lies. And I signed for the package that I wasn't good enough. Because as soon as you're wounded, the enemy immediately comes to the front door of your heart, like a FedEx delivery guy. And he knocks on your front door and he says, special delivery. And the package is really nicely wrapped, but the contents inside are lies about yourself, lies about God, and lies about other people. And in the process of being wounded, we don't know what to do with all of our wounds. And so there's a lot of lies that we sign for. And so I signed up for the lie that I wasn't good enough. So fashion and golf became my idols, the ways that I proved that I was good enough. And so life became all about the do, all about the performance, all about the accomplishments, all the ways that I could show everybody that I was good enough, to where I, again, became a slave to the busy and become known more as a human doing than a human being. And so
as you climb that ladder gets a little wobbly too as you climb it, huh? With all the do.
Yeah, when life becomes all about the do, life really starts to stink.
Yeah.
We got a lot of covering up to do. And I knew how to cover. That's what we do with the mess of life. We either cover up the mess, we either hide the mess, or we try to clean the mess. But God says, just take the lid off the mess and let me love you back to life. And so once we take off the lid, we can then we could create space for him to put what he wants in. And this comes back to why I brought this up in the first place. You can only dispense what's been deposited, or you can only diffuse what's been deposited. So if I put the water bottle and the oil outside of the diffuser, it's not going to diffuse anything. I've got to take off the lid and put it in, right? There's got to be a receiving for that container to receive water and to receive oil. And here's what happens a lot of times. We get exposed to the love of God, but we've never, or very rarely, experienced the love of God. It's sitting right outside. We're in the same vicinity. We're around it, but we haven't accessed it. And so there's a woman with the issue of blood, and without going the whole story, there was one lady who touched the hem of his garment, and Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And they're like, "Jesus, of course, everybody touched you. There's tons of people around you." And he says, No, somebody accessed my power. There was a lot of people who were around Jesus, but there was one lady who accessed his power, one person who received it. And so what can happen is we get into these environments where God's presence is all around, but unless we create space to be still and receive, we never access it. It never gets in our diffuser. And so what happens when you get plugged into your power source and you take off the lid and get the water and the oil in? You then push a button, and now the diffuser lights up, and it diffuses an aroma into the atmosphere that makes the room smell better. What happens when you get plugged into your power source and you open up the lid of your heart to experience the outrageous love of the Father? You light up the world by dispensing a sweet aroma that makes people want what you have.
That's good, man. I tell you what a great analogy. That diffuser analogy is so on point. There's a lot, even for me. I mean, as we're starting off this new year, there's a lot of things that have crowded the space of, allowing the Father to come in a more intimate, deep place in our life. And how do you deal with people that get freaked out by the J word, when they hear the word Jesus, and they might be one of these, quote unquote, let me look at the universe, or, I'm a spiritual person. How do you get people, over the Jesus word, I guess, if you will? Yeah. I mean, because if you look at him, if you just look at history and look at his life, I mean, there was nothing real bad. So why is it, do you think, people get so freaked out about the J word?
There's a lot of reasons. I could go through a whole long list of them, but I'm just going to give you the solution.
Yeah.
And so without going to all the reasons why, there's tons. And so I want, if I could just, if that's okay, I would like to just focus on what will work.
So what can we do, the viewers, to implement this in your life? We're talking about all this stuff, and you're talking about the diffuser, but how do we practically put this in action?
Yeah.
Even if you are, quote unquote, a person of the universe or a spiritual person, what can we do to create that space of receiving in 2019, David?
Sure. Well, two great questions. So we'll focus quickly on both. How do I get people over the Jesus stuff? I don't talk a whole lot about Jesus around people, right off the top. I'm not afraid to, I'm not ashamed to. If there's anybody that wants to get people connected, to the power source, or help them experience the more that they are created for. It's me. But I was hanging out with somebody last year who was on the brink of ending their life, and had called me and said, the only person I want to talk to before I end it all is you. Would you come over? I said, of course. And so without going into that story, he ended up not taking his life, and he's ended up experiencing God's love for the first time, and has started a relationship with Jesus. But while I was there, he had somebody come into his house, and I said hello to him. He told me his name was Josh, and he was kind of surprised that I even addressed him or looked at him. And so as I started to engage him in conversation, I said, Josh, what's up, baby? How you feeling, Rockstar? So good to meet you. My name's Dave. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And he was just kind of taken back a little bit. And we started chopping up. He said, oh, well, just so you know, I'm a Satanist and I practice paganism on the side. I said, well, that's really interesting. Tell me more. Not, oh my gosh, or, oh, XUL, or, okay, well, there's that. Well, let me throw a little holy water on you, bro.
Being super spiritual, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, he's a real human being. Yeah. And obviously there's been certain things in his life that had led him to believe that he needed to choose the route of Satanism and paganism. And so I said, hey, tell me more, because everybody has a story. And so he started to tell me a little bit, and I saw that it didn't take me off guard and I didn't lose a beat at all. I said, well, listen, Josh, I would love to spend some more time with you, bro. You seem like a fascinating person. I'm going to finish up with your friend right here. But why don't we, I'm going to shoot you my number. Why don't we go grab some lunch next week? He said, oh, buddy, I can't do that. I don't have any money. I said, don't worry. It's on me. He said, well, why would you want to do that? I said, well, I'd really like to get to know you. He said, well, why would you want to do that? I said, because you really matter. Wow. And you could tell it didn't have a place to land on his heart. He was really taken back and didn't say anything for about 15 seconds. And we just stood there with probably in his mind, awkward silence. And he said, oh, okay, yeah, I'd really like that. And we got together the next week, and for 3.5 hours, I sat in a Chick-fil-A and I listened to Josh's story, a story that he had never told anybody in his entire life. And I won't go through the story, obviously, for sake of time, even the highlights. But that day, he had somebody love him really well just because I listened really well. Nobody, or very few people, have time or would make time to listen to somebody's story for 3.5 hours. I didn't preach at him. I didn't talk at him. I didn't tell him, hey, here's what you need to do, or here's how you need to change, or here's how you need to fix this, or oh, that makes perfect sense. Oh, let me tell you what. No, just tell me more.
Because if we're so busy, we're so distracted, we're so caught up in all this other, how do we have anything, and it's very interesting you're talking about this, because the message I keep hearing over and over and over is, if we become empty and then filled, that's really what happens, is the overflow that you're experiencing, you're just pouring out over to him. So when people get freaked out of the J word, it's really just, he was the master at doing what you're talking about, just genuinely being interested in people's life. He wasn't like, this person that's, unapproachable or uncaring or anything like that. It's just, I think society has gotten it, out of whack and distracted, as we've said. I mean, that's the number one rule, game and trick of the enemy, is to keep us busy, as you said. And so how do we execute this in our daily life of this stillness, with some practical tips for the listeners?
Yeah, totally.
And I didn't want to stop you, because I didn't think
No. That was the point. Is just, when you listen well, you're loving well. And when you love well, it opens people's heart. And so I don't have an agenda except to love. I don't have an agenda to convert or convince or to change or to, I really, and love always looks like something. Love always looks like something. And in this moment, it looked like me listening. And at the end, I was driving it back home, and we started playing some worship music, and I started to put my hand on his leg, and I actually did, and started to pray over him. And I was still timid to do that not because I don't want to pray. I pray over people all the time. But I was just feeling out the moment. Holy Spirit, what are you up to? And as I started to pray over him, I started to declare a few things, but it was just very spontaneous, organic, just in the moment. And it wasn't rapid fire. It wasn't, it was just boom. It was just a few statements. And as I took my hand off to stop praying, he said, Dave, please don't stop praying. I felt something happening.
Wow.
Yeah. As we finished up that time, I hugged him it was one of the first times he'd ever been hugged in his life. He had no affection from his family. He really didn't even know his family. And so love really looked like something. I could go through all the details again, but regardless, Josh experienced God's love for the very first time that day, and his life's never been the same. And so I don't have an agenda to get Jesus across or to present the gospel or anything like that.
Just being present with people,
right.
And loving on them.
What does this person need today? And so the way that has happened, the way that shifted in me, that has not been the way before my dad passed. It was not that way at all. And so as I started to learn how to be still with the Lord, again, it started to help me shift my heart. I don't have to be heard now. I don't have to get my thoughts across. I don't have to get my opinion in. Like, if I listen to your story, that is a huge win. Massive, massive win. And I never come into it's very, very rare if I come into an appointment saying, I've got 1 hour, and I've got to go. Like, at the minimum, I'm giving the person 2 hours, even if they don't need it. And of course, there with Josh, I gave him 3.5, and I wasn't planning on it being that long, but I still had margin, and so it worked out that way. And of course, that's not normal. 3.5 hours is very rare, but 2 is pretty common. And so, let's talk a little bit about implementing, like you suggested. There's a lot of college football games going on today, a lot of bowl games, and in the game of football, you get 6 timeouts a game, 3 each half. But in the game of life, you get as many timeouts as you want. But we often live as though we don't have any left. And so we never call them, or very rarely call them, or even think about calling them. It's just not even on our radar because it's just invest, invest, invest. And if all we do is invest, we are guaranteed to be stressed. But if you develop the rhythm of rest, invest, 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 you will be at your best. And so what I want to encourage the viewers to do, and what I encourage the people right off the top, wherever I'm at in the world, the first thing I want them to do is to learn how to call a timeout in life. You get as many as you want. And this isn't an excuse to be lazy, because stillness doesn't mean laziness, but busyness doesn't mean productiveness. You can be running on a treadmill and not going anywhere. You might be burning some calories, right? But you're not getting anywhere. And so, it's not an excuse to be lazy. So what I encourage people to do is to plan their timeouts. Now, I know in football, you don't plan your timeouts. When you had some negative momentum going in the game, the coach has to have the wherewithal to call the timeout. Be like, hey, we need to regroup. And sometimes we've been sacked by disappointment, or we've been intercepted by fear, right? And there's some times that we just need to call a timeout and regroup and get our mind right and breathe. And so, but sometimes if we're not used to calling timeouts, we won't know how to do it, or we won't know when to do it, or we'll just resort to, venting on social media, or making a phone call to a family member or a friend, or, whatever your go-to is to handle stress. And so what I encourage people to do is to plan their timeouts. So ideally, it doesn't work out with everybody's schedule this way, but you would have let's say a 3-hour block of time, and you have a 10-minute timeout to start. Then you invest 50 minutes, whatever that investment is, whether you're knocking out emails, or you're marketing something, or you're on the phone, or The only time it doesn't work is if you're meeting one-on-one with people, because you're not going to meet with people for 50 minutes and then say, hold on, we need a timeout. You know?
That would be awkward.
You know, it would be very awkward. Yeah. But what I do now is when I meet with people for 2 or 3 hours, I almost always take a timeout right after, because I've just poured out a ton and I need to get refilled right after. I do this a lot when I come home from wherever I've been, and I sit in the garage unless my kids run out the door as soon as I get home. But I sit in the garage and I don't get out of the car for 10 minutes, and I just am still for 10 minutes, preparing my mind for the opportunity that I have to love my wife and my kids for that evening.
Man, that's good. That's worth its weight in gold for all these entrepreneurs and busy people, is coming back home and being ready to approach that family unit. I tell you, thank you for sharing that, because I needed to hear that again.
Yeah. I was encouraged by a mentor once. He said, often the only thing I offered my kids was my tiredness.
Wow.
Hey, you want to play? No, Daddy's tired. Hey, Dad, you want to throw some football? Daddy's tired. It's been a long day. Hey, Dad, you want to go do some race cars? I'd love to, buddy, but Daddy's so tired. Work's been crazy. I've just been nonstop at the office, son. And I got tired of offering my kids my tiredness. And so I wanted to, if there's anybody who deserves my best me, it's my family. But often they get the leftovers at best.
Yeah.
And so I want to sit in my car. I breathe a lot. Now, I'm not just about deep breathing. I do think deep breathing is beneficial. But often I've got worship music going on. Now, you can choose whatever instrumental music you like. If you're not into the worship stuff, that's fine. I've got all kinds of playlists on Spotify that I can shoot you, or we can shoot out to the viewers, that I call pill bottles. We live in a very over-medicated society. I'm not against medication, but in light of the theme, I have a pill bottle for everything. We often have a pill for everything. And so these pill bottles I call playlist. And so when I'm feeling stressed, I go to the playlist of rest. When I'm feeling fearful, I put on the playlist of faith, because faith will fight fear in me. You get the point. There's all kinds of playlists just like this. And so every song on that playlist is about perfect peace, or about rest, or about faith, or about confidence in God. And so it might be 10 minutes, it might be 30 minutes, whatever it is. The point is, I'm calling a timeout. I'm breathing, and I need to get past the clutter. I need to get past the chatter. I need to get past the noise and just be still. And the point of stillness isn't just to be still, and it isn't just to get past the noise. The point is to hear what the Father's saying. And so the enemy shouts lies. We don't have to tune into that radio frequency. And often the megaphone that he uses is our pain. And so we can hear the enemy's lies easily. But while the enemy shouts lies, Jesus whispers truth. Why does Jesus whisper truth? Because you have to be close to hear a whisper.
It's good.
And so you have to be still to hear a whisper. There's something intimate. There's something personal about it. There's some kind of friendship there about it that's developed. And so there isn't no drive-through to the whisper, right? It's only dine-in.
White tablecloth, great bouquet, all that.
Yeah, you got it. And so I'm trying to listen for his voice, and I've helped so many people hear God's voice for the very first time. I've met with so many people who say, I can't hear God's voice, or it's impossible, or you just don't understand what's going on in my mind, or how much noise there is. And I'll just smile and nod and say, yeah, I can't imagine, but I'm really excited about at least exploring this idea. And And it's unbelievable how God comes for their heart every single time, and how God opens their ears to hear, because he's speaking at all times. It's just a matter of whether we can hear him. And so it's not like he's off somewhere and we've got to, figure out the magic formula to get him to talk. He's ready to give us what I call fresh downloads every day. That was a good download, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. More of that. And so, yeah.
That's good. And it's so true though, how, we don't press in and we just, come, in prayer or just in our thoughts with a laundry list of, requests and demands, that we don't really slow down to listen to what he's got to say about the design and structure of our life. And once we get to that place, as I did in California a couple of years ago, we need to exercise it, just like we need to, exercise physically. We need to exercise these spiritual disciplines, and we forget, and we don't mark out the times for this, and then we find ourselves, spinning out of control, needing or looking for other medicine to cure what ultimately needs to be cured by him. And I don't think I'm the only one needing this message today, starting off the new year, with this prescription of, finding quiet time. So I hope all of you listeners out there are really getting a lot out there. Anything in closing that you'd like to share just about this be still and know that I'm God? Or
Yeah. I just want to encourage you not to give up. If you're not having somebody model it with you off the top, it can be very discouraging, because it feels like, again, you've got so much noise and I'll never get past the noise. And usually the first time that you do this, I would almost always say, listen to worship music or something. You can do silence, but silence often amplifies the noise more. I'm not against it. I think it's very beneficial, actually. But I think the music is a good first step.
Yeah.
I had one person listen to this message and they locked themselves in a dark closet and they're like, I didn't get anything out of it. I'm like, yeah, that's probably not the best start.
To begin
good try.
with, maybe they're inevitably you can get to that place, but for beginners, the novice, they need to walk
when you're just
before
starting.
they run.
Right. And so don't be discouraged. And I would say if you're starting off, you can do a 10-minute timeout. That's fine. But it often takes people 20 to 30 minutes to get past the initial noise to where they can really lean in and hear. And so don't be discouraged by the noise. If you work through some noise, you're actually making some progress. You're not, it's not, oh, that was a waste of time. I didn't hear anything. Well, you worked through some, you at least got still for 10 minutes. Even if you just start with 10 minutes, you at least got still for 10 minutes. And then 50 minutes later, you can do another 10-minute timeout and then do another 50 minutes of investing. Again, that's ideal. It might not work out that way with your schedule, but what gets scheduled gets done. If you just have good intentions that sometime today it's going to happen and it has never been a rhythm of your life, it is almost 0% that you'll do it.
You got to have it as a rock in your calendar, right? Whether it's, going to the doctor or going to an important meeting or going into church or going to the gym or having meetings with your, most influential clients. I mean, if your most influential client that you deal with wanted to have a meeting, you wouldn't postpone it or not put it in your calendar. It would be there indefinitely. And we have to look at that, because when we get the email that somebody sends, it's a little chafy, or we get the voicemail that somebody's, questioning your character.
True.
Even closer, your kids or your spouse might do something that could rub you wrong. How is it that you're going to truly respond to that in the correct way versus the way to just get on this merry-go-round that never stops? And I think so many people listening to this, video are on this merry-go-round, and the merry-go-round never stops. And in 2019, David, I really appreciate this message, because I need to hear it. I needed to hear it just this morning. I'm going to be totally transparent. I'm listening to the lies of the enemy about something new and fresh in my life. Even a marriage that doesn't quote unquote meet my expectations. We have to be real careful with expectations from our perspective versus the perspective of God himself, because we often set them at a totally different level than what he wants for our life. And he is a good father. And what a great story. I mean, how you overcame this loss of your father. And there's a lot of people watching. The holidays are not easy time.
That's right.
You know, there's a lot of people out there on life support, probably pilled up, drugged up, drunk, watching this after a crazy night last night where they, drank. And you're just one step away from really emptying
opening up
yourself.
the lid.
Yeah, and opening up that lid to get refilled. That's a great analogy. And I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're a busy man, and you've got some time to go play with your kids, and I know that's very important to you. But I'm so thankful for you. And who would have thought that in Goshen, Virginia, I would meet a guy named David Guinn that really was that fresh aroma, amongst 400 men. And we shared how I went to Romania, and he's with E3, and now we're having this discussion on January 1st. To give you all the hope of a great year. And that's building margin. That is, scheduling time to really fill ourselves up and get that tea filled back up, so that we can be full for those that are counting on us. Any last words you'd like to share?
Yeah, for the one that might have had a crazy night, there's so much hope for you, and there's so much freedom right on the other side of that lid. There's so much freedom on the other side of you just opening up every room of your heart to let the outrageous love of the Father in. His love is all the way, all the time, 100%. There's nothing that will ever change about the Father's love for you. The only thing that will change is your ability to receive it. So the Father just wants to know, will you open up more space to let me love you today? I don't want to change you. I don't want to fix you. I don't want to do any of the things that the enemy might make you think that I just want to love you back to life. If you would just open up the lid of your heart and let me give you a refill.
That's a good word, man. And I hope you guys continue to follow this podcast. And definitely I'm going to have David put the link to his playlist inside the comments of this. And if you got something out of this, share it. And meditate on it and make 2019 the year that we truly do create that space for God to really do amazing things with and through us. And it's been my honor today. The goal of this show is that we have these healthy rhythms as it relates to health and wealth. And we talk about, people, whether it's, a guy like David that is a life coach and in full-time ministry and missionary work, to business leaders, to people in the health sphere, So I'm looking forward to this year, ramping this up. And if you've got a business or an idea that you think needs to be put out there, definitely reach out to me. January is pretty full, but we're looking for February and March. And definitely follow David Guinn, and he does a hashtag Make Monday Matter. Is it plural or just matter?
Matter, yep.
Yeah, so definitely check him out on Monday as you're starting the week, and his video podcast. And I hope you guys have an awesome day and enjoying some football, some fellowship, and some friendship, and make some time to fill that canister up that can run on empty. Y'all have a great day, and God bless.